and welcome to today's edition of Books in the World, a presentation of the Cape Cod Writers Center. I'll be your host on today's program. I'm Bob Silverberg, but more important than that, our guest is here, and that's Kathryn Knight. Welcome to our program, Kathryn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The book we're talking about is Kathryn's second book called GULL Harbor, Somewhere on Cape Cod.
Somewhere on Cape Cod, yeah.
Somewhere on Cape Cod. Where have you located GULL Harbor?
It's loosely based on Wellfleet. So
Wellfleet.
The town is fictional, but Wellfleet was what was in my mind as I was sort of putting the setting together.
Yeah, and your characters have various places to visit on Cape Cod,
Yeah.
which makes it very, very local, especially for our program.
I hope so. I hope it's entertaining for people who are visiting the Cape or live on the Cape. They'll see some places they recognize.
And the entire country, in case they ever thought about Cape Cod.
That's right.
You read about it in GULL Harbor. I made a note that says paranormal romance.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sort of an interesting classification for writing. Tell me more about that.
Sure. It's actually a very huge subgenre of the romance genre, and paranormal can essentially mean anything. In this case, this is sort of a contemporary romance with a paranormal element of a ghost, but it can also have main characters that are vampires or werewolves or angels or demons. There can be time travel, anything that is beyond the scope of the natural world.
So it isn't just ghosts, it really spreads out.
It really does. So within my publisher, we have to break it down into two further lines because it is such a large subgenre.
Uh-huh. Your first book, I understand, Silver Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, you did a Books in the World on that.
I did do Silver Lake interview,
a year
yep.
or so ago with Madeline. That has had, I would think, phenomenal success. It's been on the Amazon list for quite some time.
Yeah, they both, I've been really thrilled. They both have done very well selling digitally and in print locally. So I've been very pleased.
Yes. The ghost-like aspect, and we'll talk more about that, of course, but is that always been an interest of yours, or come lately?
Always, since I was a child. One of my very first paranormal romance books, and I was very young, so by romance it was very sweet, sort of story set in the past, but it was a ghost story mixed with this sort of sweet romance, and became my favorite book, and I read it over and over again. So that really sort of inspired my love of ghost stories.
Uh-huh. And do you search out the ghost stories, or do you?
I do. I tend to do things like go on ghost tours, and I read
ghost stores?
Tours. Like
ghost stores.
When you go to a different city, they often have there's one in Barnstable too that I've been on, and they'll walk you through and say, well, this place is haunted, and they usually throw in history and stuff like that. So I've never seen a ghost, but I've been on the tours.
No, those are going. Have you ever felt an apparition or feeling somewhere about ghost-like?
Not an apparition, but when I was interviewing a medium at a party, I had no idea that a medium would be there, and he had no idea that I would be there, but I asked if I could ask him a few questions for the book I was working on, and he couldn't answer my questions because he was so he was picking up something that he needed to tell me, and he just kept telling me things that I don't see how he could have known. So it was a very spooky experience.
Isn't that spooky, though?
Yeah.
I have met a fellow who speaks to his spirits.
Yeah.
He's a Spanish fellow. So he says, to my espiritus, but to his spirits. And sometimes when I'm talking to him, he will look past me and say, but in fact, he told me to write. And then he turned to me and said, why aren't you writing? And then he turned to nowhere in particular. He says, he's not doing any writing.
Having a conversation with that person.
And I didn't see anybody else there. I didn't feel hidden either, but he had a complete conversation right around me.
Yeah, it was fascinating, and the facts that were coming forward from this person I'd never met were really right on. So that sort of made a believer out of me.
Kathryn, how do you explain that? Can you?
Well, In my books, at least, I tend to use the idea that a ghost would be someone that can't cross over for whatever reason, can't accept their death, they have unfinished business. And that's sort of what drives the mystery in my books. But I also think that there are people that have the gift to be able to connect with a spirit that's passed, and that people do leave an energy behind, and if the circumstances are right.
I think of the TV Ghostbuster type programs where they go in with all sorts of recording equipment, vibration readings and so forth. And sometimes they're successful and get a signal, and other times, of course, just nothing.
And I tend to watch those too to get ideas about sparks my imagination.
Kathryn, there are many places on the Cape that have some mystery behind them in a ghost-like atmosphere. Have you visited any of the homes around here?
Well, I did. I went on the ghost tour in Barnstable Village, which was a lot of fun. I'm actually writing a book set there right now. So I called the tour guide the next day and asked him follow-up questions, which he probably doesn't get very often. But we went to the old jail, which is deemed to be very haunted. And that is part of my story. And that's right in the village. And it's the oldest wooden jail in the country.
Right here on the Cape?
Yeah, right here on the Cape. Yeah. So that's a lot of people unfortunately passed away there because the conditions of the jail, it's just three little cells where they would sort of jam everybody in before the Revolutionary War, and people, illness spread very quickly. And in addition to that, we walked all around the different, the graveyards, the old graveyards, and you just got a bit of history along with some places that have seen sort of a paranormal phenomenon. Yeah,
so in the very old jail then, according to the theory of the spirit or the reluctance to leave, and under the circumstances, it's very possible that if you follow that theory, there they are.
That's right. So that is what I'm working on right now. My fourth novel, that jail plays a pretty significant part.
One of the men I know on the Cape who has a B&B, he bought it some years ago, but it was prior, it goes way back to the early 1800s in its construction. And he says things happen there. The door will be locked from the inside, and he knew that it was open before.
Right.
And you sort of straighten up and you say, ooh.
Yeah, I totally. And you maybe start to doubt yourself. Maybe I'm wrong, but then if it happens a few times, then you start to say, okay, what's going on here?
All right, let's get back to Gull Harbor, the book that brought us together this afternoon.
Great.
There's the cover of the book. We open the book, and there's a printed page.
Oh, a little excerpt?
Immediately.
Yeah.
That's before the credits and all the rest of it that go on there. And if I may, I would like to read a little bit of this.
Sure. It's a little steamy, but if you'd like to read some of it, that's okay.
Yeah, because well, you tell me why did you put this particular page ahead of all the rest of the story? It's part of the story, and you've lifted it and brought it over.
Well, they ask us to choose an excerpt that we would like to highlight on the first page, just to give people sort of a little teaser of what's to come and hopefully make them want to start that book and keep reading. So it is from sort of the middle of the book, and it hopefully doesn't give too much away, but it does sort of hopefully hook the reader into wanting to know more.
Okay, now going back to the phrase paranormal romance, this gets a little romantic.
It does. It's romance,
indeed.
Yes.
All right. We're talking about the heroine of the book.
Claire.
She shook her head vigorously. I can't spend your money to do my job. It makes no sense. It's not about that, Claire. I keep thinking, keeping you safe. He closed the distance between them, setting off alarm bells in the back of her mind. Squaring her shoulders, she took a deep breath. I realize you're trying to help me, and I appreciate that, but what gives you the right to worry about my safety? I don't need the right. He stood over her. She took a step backwards, bumping against his desk. His words shouldn't have sounded menacing, but for some reason they did. She nodded weakly. I am going to keep you safe, Claire, he said, his eyes flashing. He reached out and stroked her arm. A shiver ran through her, and she gripped the edge of the desk for support. Okay, she breathed. Every nerve in her body was calling for him. She closed her eyes as his hands moved up to cradle her head. And I'm not going to read the last paragraph.
That's a good place to stop.
If I've interested anyone in this, it's right there at the front of the book. And actually, it's very romantic, and it's admittedly kind of sexy.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, that's the idea, and that's what the romance readers are looking for. So.
Yeah, if it's a romance novel, there is romance and obviously some sort of sexual attitude toward it.
Yep.
You like these people, I think.
Oh, I love them. My characters, absolutely. Yeah.
How long did it take you to develop Kathy and then Max, her?
Claire and Max?
I mean, yeah.
You know, my stories always start out with some different ideas, and then I'll go one way and another way until they sort of finally find their path. And then as I write, I usually will write at least 5 or 6 chapters where I get to know them, and then I'll go back and start again. And now I feel like I really know them, and I can start to flesh them out and give them a lot more characteristics that befit them now that I know their personality. That's
interesting, Kathryn, that you've already written them and then you come back and they sort of gel. And
yes, exactly. So I need to get those first chapters out to sort of make it flow and see where I'm going with it, and it's a get to know you period. And then I've got a real good idea and I go back and they really start to come alive.
Now, you dedicated this book to your 2 sons. Mm-hmm. And
they haven't read it yet.
Yeah, and how do they feel about Mama writing some of these passages?
You know, they take it in stride. Neither one has read it yet because they're a little too young for it. And I have been trying to give them my passion for reading my whole life. And one of my sons loves to read. The other son is a little grudging about it. But I hope that they'll read it as they get older. And I think that no matter what you like to read, what genre you like to read, any reading is good. So I think that it really doesn't bother them at all as far as the genre that I write in.
They've probably told each other where the good parts are.
Probably. Yes. There's enough copies on the shelf, but what do I know? They could have found it.
In Gull Harbor, your book, Kathy, there aren't too many characters altogether.
No.
It's a very small cast, really.
Yep. And I've heard people say that they wish there were more characters, but in this case, Claire is fairly isolated when she comes to town, and she doesn't know anybody, and people are suspicious of her. She's a medium. She talks to ghosts. She's sort of an intruder in a small town that really doesn't accept her. So I needed to sort of get that isolation through.
Mm-hmm. We're not giving away too much because right at the very beginning of the book gives the reasons for her being in the situation in which she is.
Right.
And she is coming to a town on Cape Cod to live, at least temporarily, in a home that for the previous owners has become too scary to stay in.
Right. They can't live there anymore because the sort of poltergeist activity has made their life terrible and frightening.
Yeah, so there's something going on there that's very upsetting to them.
Right.
And the young lady as a, what would you call her?
She's a psychic medium, a medium. Mm-hmm.
Goes in there to see and is successful to a very slow beginning and more developed situation.
Mm-hmm. And there's certainly reasons why she has difficulty at first, more than one reason. The spirit has its reasons for being sort of antagonistic and not trusting anyone in the house.
There was a story in one of your write-ups, or a write-up about you. I went to the web.
There's a lot.
And found it said there are 27 Kathryn Knights on one list. I haven't gone deeply into it. There are probably thousands more.
Right.
A very popular name you have.
It is, yeah.
But they use the letters POV, point of view.
Oh. I wrote an article that was, on point of view, and I think I touched on the fact that my third manuscript, which is not released yet, I wrote a YA, which is young adult paranormal romance, and that is obviously targeted for a different age group, more of the 13 to 18 age group. And a lot of the young adult novels are written from the first person point of view. That tends to be the most popular way to write young adult, and that was a whole new challenge for me because my previous books had been written in the third person point of view.
You're looking in on them.
Exactly, and as I still try to make that connection between the reader and the character whose point of view you're sort of living through, but I go from Max to Claire, so you sort of get two different points of view, understanding their motivation a little bit better, whereas when you're writing first person, the reader can't know anything outside of what that one person who's saying I this and I that.
Transpose yourself.
That's right. It's very hard. So that was quite a challenge.
Yes, because you're hardly aged, not by a long shot, but still you're
I'm
writing.
I'm not 16,
about,
right?
Yeah, you're writing as a 16.
Yep. And what I did is I found a beta reader at the local high school. So once I had written it, we went through chapter by chapter, and I sent her the chapter, and I said, you pick out what doesn't ring true, what doesn't sound like something that a 16-year-old would say, or some way they might not behave, things like that. And also, as research, I spent an entire year pretty much reading exclusively YA novels to get myself into that position. So between those two things, I feel like the voice came through fairly authentic.
Does that have a title yet?
Right now I'm calling it Divine Fall.
Divine Fall. As in autumn? Or
as in autumn?
Or as in precipitous?
Double meaning.
Precipitous autumn.
Yes.
I was looking over all the notes that come up on the screen, and it says, Kathryn Knight, fitness instructor, would-be gardener.
That sounds like a way I would have described myself, yes. I am a fitness instructor and a personal trainer, and that's my part-time job when I'm not shuttling kids around or writing. And I love to be outside and garden, but I'm not super successful at it.
You're busy writing.
Yeah, that's right. But while I'm gardening, it helps to get my mind going because gardening is something I can do outside. I still feel like I'm accomplishing something, but it's not something you have to overly think. So maybe that's my problem. But I'm working on my novel while I'm, pulling weeds type thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The earlier book of yours, which has been successful to Kathryn Knight, Silver Lake. What was that about? I have not had a chance to read it.
It is also a love story and a ghost story. It's set in Connecticut, actually, and Silver Lake is also a fictional lake, but it's set around areas that people would recognize. And the basic premise is a reunion between a group of friends who became estranged when one of their friends vanished their senior year of high school. So 5 years after that, they agreed to reunite at this lake house at Silver Lake where they had spent time together in one final attempt to try to solve the mystery of their friend's disappearance. And the main character, her name is Rain, and she's sort of determined to make this connection for their friend Brandy's mother, who is dying, and she's terminal, and they want to try to uncover the mystery of what happened to her only daughter. And she's also hoping to reconcile with Jason, who is the man who loved her in high school. She broke his heart, and she's hoping to get that friendship back. So course, the paranormal activity starts fairly quickly at the lake house.
Well, listening to describe the book Silver Lake and having read Gull Harbor, do you find it easy, or is it just something that happens in your imagination and your ability to write?
To come up with these ideas.
To come up with these sort of ghoulish.
Yeah. I think it's a combination of just, I've always had a very active imagination, and growing up I was always making up stories to entertain myself. We didn't have all the electronics and the social media and the computer games, and I was the oldest kid, and so I was expected to entertain myself all day. So I would just make up stories. Yeah, I'd get on my bike and I'd ride away and I'd pretend that, you know, I was on an adventure. And so it's just something I've always done. And I really had Silver Lake sort of finished in my head from start to finish before I took that next step. My husband finally sort of pushed me into that next step of actually writing it down.
Yeah, put it down on paper already.
Right, exactly.
Never mind the notes all over the building.
Right, right. So that's a frightening aspect.
Yeah. All right, now you finished your third, although it isn't published yet.
No, it's being considered for acquisition right now, so I'm hoping to hear something soon about that one.
I would think with the way you describe your imagination and your ease of writing that there's a fourth one already.
Well, the fourth one is
the
Barnstable jail sort of spooky ghost story one. So I'm coming back to my YA went a little different direction, but I'm coming back to the ghost stories with the fourth one.
Is it easy for you to write?
Yes and no. I love to do it. I think sometimes I'm not very good at giving up if I'm struggling with a plot point. Rather than walk away, I will sort of sit around and bang my head until it comes. So that can get a little frustrating. And I'm a perfectionist, so going over and over and over it to make sure that I haven't left any plot holes, that I haven't said a character's 23 at one point and 24 at another, those type of things.
And suddenly he had a beard.
Exactly. So, so I can get a little picky with things like that, but it pays off in the end. Well,
having read and enjoyed Gull Harbor, I have a question for you. And we mentioned there aren't too many characters in there. All right. You've got Claire, who's the heroine, and Max, her lover, and protector, too.
Right.
And then there's Dan, Dan O'Brien. Poor Dan gets kind of left out.
Everybody loves Dan, I know. They want him to have his own story.
Yeah, you know, you don't give him romance, you don't give him... Poor Dan.
I know, poor Dan. And I might give him a story one day. But he's
a nice fellow.
He is a nice fellow. Everybody loved him. His role was really sort of to be a friend to both of them, be a sounding board for both of them, and also to help bring them together.
And he does.
He does.
And he does. Yeah. Well, it's very, very nice reading this book, and well, I hate the phrase page turner, you know, because it sounds a little icky, but it is. You want to know what's going to happen next, especially because of the mystic atmosphere that the heroine finds herself in.
I hope so. Most people, that is the feedback that I get, that it's a very quick read because there's a lot of mystery involved and a lot of tension and a lot of conflict, and you want to know what's coming next.
Yes. No, it's very enjoyable.
Thank you.
I could open anywhere and start reading and find the various aspects of your book, the mystic part, the friendship part, the romantic part, and some of it is happily very explicit.
Well.